Let me do my share screen. Can everyone see my PowerPoint?
Yes. Hi.
Just
Yeah.
okay. So today's subject is actually based on I came across a document that I actually haven't looked at in a while. And it was a document that I remember receiving from the Ministry of Education some years ago. And one thing I would like for the believers to do, if you're interested in receiving this document, you
Yes.
put your put your email in the chat, and I will. I've already scanned it to the computer because I couldn't find the exact date that I received this as an attachment. But this document is actually dated November 15th, 2010. So it's been a while. I will send this document to you. Today's presentation is really based on this study tech document that came through the Ministry of Education, but it's really given us some insight into what's called the 3 barriers of study. Okay. By Allah's grace, I think that the way we're going to look at it today is going to make this very easy to understand and remember. Okay, that's number one. The point of origin of today's subject actually came from an ayat that I read in the Holy Qur'an. Might have been either yesterday or the day before. And as soon as I read this ayat, I saw the study tech in the Holy Quran. So let me also preface this by saying that not many, all of the ideas that have been presented through the Zoom meetings we've been doing now for, it's hard to believe it's been 2 years already, are either rooted in something I heard the minister teach on, or an idea that comes to mind while I'm making salat. And I say that to say, where Allah says that he teaches man by the pen what man knew not. I say that to say that all of this just is based on inspiration by Allah's grace, in connection with what I hope is my purpose in this life, and sharing what I'm blessed to receive to the believers so that we can all benefit from it.
Oh.
One key point on the concept of cognitions. Every cognition is important. As each of us do our own individual studies, it's similar, if you remember the teaching on the building of the mothership. There were different groups of scientists in different groups of the planet, or we can say in Nippon. And each group, even though all these parts weren't they possibly weren't made in Nippon, but based on the teachings, each group was putting together their own part, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then each group didn't know what the other group was doing. And then all the parts were brought together to produce the mother plane, correct?
Correct.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so as each one of us is studying, that same concept, we could say, is taking place, because as each individual studies, you're learning the tech or the teachings or the self-improvement, and you're learning it based on what Allah is blessing you to see. So you're building your part of a higher plane of thought and existence. And then as we come together, each one of us is bringing our parts together and combining the concepts together. And what happens to the case gain in the tone scale? It goes up, correct? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So the more our case gain increases, the more our tone goes up. What we're doing is we're receiving more attention units, as he explains it in Dianetics. We're getting more theta. And if you look at the way he explains it in Science of Survival, we are less interbulated. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now, at any time, if there's any concepts or terms that we're using that we don't have a full understanding of, please raise your hand. I have no problem stopping and dealing with questions because I want us to all flow together. Does that make sense?
Yes. Can you tell me what case gain is?
Case gain. Okay. Case gain is such that think back of where your mind was when you first got on the Zoom meeting this morning. Okay. Where your thought level was. And then what happened as you listened to what other people were saying? Did your tone go up?
Yes.
That's case gain. Okay.
Like something to support your thoughts?
When your tone goes
action?
up and you get more enthusiasm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's case gain. That's
Thank you.
Case gain in Dianetics is like the ways of ascent of the Holy Qur'an. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And that's what we do. We have to take the language of the tech and now we got to understand it in the language that we have. Okay, in Islam. So the Lord of the ways of ascent. Okay. And if you look at that tone scale, when you go from I think around 2.5 on the tone scale is boredom. And then as you start to go up, you start dealing with enthusiasm, and then you go up to the higher levels of thinking. When you look at the minister's tone, the minister always talks about wherever he goes, he brings his atmosphere with him, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And whenever we have heard the minister teach, what is his tone level? It's very high. Okay, so he has a tremendous amount of case gain. The minister said that the mind of the original man is infinite, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're not limiting ourselves. I think in Dianetics, L. Ron Hubbard made reference, excuse me, that he used an arbitrary number of 1,000 attention units. Well, the original man has access to an infinite amount of attention units. And this is why what we have received through the Savior, it is designed to break the circle of the scientists to make each one of us a part of that circle. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. How much, when you look at the scientists, how much of their mind do they have access to? We can't even comprehend that yet. Okay. But what we can comprehend is, for those of us that have studied this tech in conjunction with our supreme wisdom, we could say that we are no longer the individuals that we used to be, that we can at least see that there's been a tremendous amount of benefit and mental improvement since we followed what the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has given to us. Can we admit to that?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. So that's a long-winded explanation to your question. That's case gain.
Thank you.
Okay. Have you ever been kind of down, you get on the prayer rug, and then when you get done with you're making your salat, you feel like a burden has been lifted from you?
Yes, sir.
That's case gain. That's case gain. Okay. So the barriers to study. Oh wait, before we go any further, Assalamu alaikum, Sister Sharon.
Walaikum salam, sir. Happy Savior's Day.
Savior's Day. How are you in the young brothers?
Everyone is well. All praises due to Allah. Thank you for asking.
Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it.
Yes, sir. How are you and your family?
Oh, we've gotten past our COVID. We're good. By Allah's grace, 2 years ago, COVID was like a death sentence. So,
Right.
but we have a whole nother power that we depend on.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Say yes.
Brother Ahmad out on the West Coast, how's the snow?
Walaikum salam, beloved. The snow is packed. It's not where we are. We more so are having rain and wind and thunderstorms, but we are all fine in our household here. So all praise is due to Allah.
Praise due to Allah. It's good to hear from you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for today. Always love it.
Yes, sir. Sister Deborah, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, sir. Happy Savior's Day to you
Happy
and the
Savior's Day.
family.
Yes, ma'am. How are you?
I am well. Sitting here wondering why last week we were in the 70s and today we're in the 30s here in Atlanta.
Well, here's how you answer that question. What makes rain, hail, snow, and earthquake?
Earthquake.
Here we go. Yeah, I had to call and check on my mom. She's dealing with that northeaster up there in Boston. So
Yeah, we just got
worries.
hit. We just got hit with the snow yesterday, and now it's sunny out. So hey,
The
Yeah,
Northeastern wasn't so bad in Boston.
uh-huh.
It was,
well, what about Weymouth? She's in Weymouth.
oh, that's a little more snow that way.
Yeah. But yes, sir, everybody's well here. My daughter is just getting over from being sick, but it wasn't COVID. Thank Allah. She didn't have COVID, but she was down for a few days.
Okay. All praise due to Allah. Now, Sister Raynell, I'm gonna give you another example of case game. Watch this. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Tina.
Walaikum salam, brother Lukman family.
I'm
Yes.
gonna make them Sister Tina.
Yeah, walaikum salam, Sister Shella and everyone. Brother Lukman,
Yes, ma'am.
when you were talking about case game, and you and the sister, it made me, and you said when we do what the ministers say do, okay, it made me also think about something Sister Ania said in our last class regarding the atonement process.
Mhm.
She that was case game too. She gained a lot of case game just by, clearing up any misunderstoods, within her own mind regarding anything, regarding us, because we could think crazy about one another, and it just be messing up our own mind,
Mhm.
Instead of going to the person and, figuring it out. Okay, so, so when she gave that example, that has really been on my mind because that's something the minister has been wanting us to do since he introduced it to us in 95. So I just wanted to point that out as a tremendous case game as well.
Praise be to Allah. See, you weren't on earlier when we were speaking about Sister Anya, and them bombs she drops on us, sometimes, and causes mountains to come out of our subconscious.
That's right. Right. That's right.
See, Sister Anya, I told you.
We love you, Sister Anya. We just do.
Yes. Yes.
Let's see. And Brother Wadud, I missed you, but I see the 219. Is that Brother Wadud? I thought I heard him earlier. He might be at work. Okay, well. iPhone, is that yours, Sister Anya, the iPhone? iPhone me. Well, let's keep it moving. So this first screen is actually a quote from the document that I'm going to send everyone. I just kind of took bits and pieces from the document but put your email in the chat, and I will actually scan this and send it to you so you have your own copy that you can print off. But it says that this personal study plan is being developed for you at the request of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan to ensure your chances of success in the study of the word of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the significance of prayer, core principles in the religion of Islam, the pillars and principles of Islam, and concepts and principles presented and taught by Minister Farrakhan in the self-improvement study guides. So this is how the document opens up. The learning objectives, excuse me, of what we're going to cover today. Number one, what exactly is a barrier? What are the cycles of action? There's one cycle of action we spoke about that's found in Surah 87, verse 1 through 3. And then I was able to find another one by Allah's grace in Surah 10, Ayat 24. We're going to look at what is study tech. What are the three barriers of study? And then we're going to look at this ayat that's in the Holy Quran that when we read it, Sister Raynell, are you familiar with what's called word clearing?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what we do is we do word clearing on the ayats in the Holy Quran. And what happens is that we find out that in doing word clearing, we are actually coming, based on the Arabic, we're coming to terms in the Arabic that are equivalent to the terms that are found in Dianetics. So we're doing word clearing in the Holy Quran, and there's an ayat that as we go through the study tech and we address this ayat, I think we'll be able to see that there's a correspondence between the study tech and the Holy Quran. And then there was something that I came across going into the Supreme Wisdom lessons, doing the word clearing, and it kind of ties the study tech of Dianetics to the Supreme Wisdom to the Holy Quran. It connects everything together. So this is the concept that we're going to be addressing today, and hopefully we can get it over within the hour. So now, barriers. According to the Dianetic Technical Dictionary, a barrier is described as an inhibiting idea, space, energy, mass, or time, a consideration or idea that limits other considerations or ideas, something beyond which an individual cannot communicate. Okay, so now let's kind of personalize this. Have we ever had a great idea? Have we ever received inspiration by Allah's grace with regards to making progress in any area of thought or action? And then have we been the foot that was in our own way and caused us not to pursue that idea?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, on one level, we can say that that idea that worked against us in the language of Dianetics, that's called an implant. Does that make sense? Okay. So how do we say that in the language of the Supreme Wisdom? Someone stuck a needle in our brain, correct?
Yeah, that would be translate.
So really, whenever we have a great idea and there's another counter effort or a counter thought that pops up, that voice that we hear in our head that kind of takes the air out of our sails, so to say, that thought, that whispering of the slinking devil comes from what's called a circuit. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So our whole brain has been sabotaged, more than likely by the very educational system that we grew up in.
True.
And we've been taught that when you look at a child from the age of 1 to 6, their minds flourish dramatically until they go to school.
Right.
I think Minister Farrakhan has used the term the killing fields with regards to the school system.
Mhm.
Has anyone heard that before?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So there's something that takes place in school. The teacher is like the nurse that stuck the needle in the brain of those babies that was on Patmos. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
I can
Okay.
follow that.
So barriers are anything which prevents egress or ingress, keeps one from getting out or getting in. And this includes not only solid barriers and interpositions, such as walls and screens or fast-moving particles, but also distance and time. In other words, another way of looking at this is some of us we stopped our study, and we're going to go into the reason why we have stopped study with regards to many subjects. How many of us can think of at least one subject we were enthusiastic about? We started it, but we didn't complete the cycle of action.
Absolutely.
I think all of us have been there before, correct?
Right.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. So what we want to do today is we want to examine why. We want to examine why we stopped that cycle of action, and how do we get that cycle of action started up again. One thing L. Ron Hubbard has stated on many occasions is that part of our insanity, part of the reason why we're low on the tone scale, part of the reason why we could say we deal with apathy or grief or any of those low-toned emotions, is because we have so many cycles of action we have started, but we have not completed them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Here's a good example. Some of us, our work schedules are crazy. Have you ever come home and the kitchen is just a mess or the bedroom is just a mess? And as soon as you walk in, you go,
Yes, sir.
and then 9 times out of 10, we might say, I'll do that later. And then we go sit on the couch and watch, we binge watch something on Netflix or something. Okay. Part of the reason why we do that is,
Okay, I'm all ears, Brother Luke, man.
part of the reason why we do that is when we look around the room, because I'm doing it as I'm looking around my office, okay? You can't see what I'm seeing, but there's a whole lot of cycles of action that I have started that have not completed. So just walking into a room, you're walking into a room that is re-stimulating.
Mm.
Because even though you don't look at everything is still looking at you. And we have all these cycles that are saying, look, you didn't finish this, you haven't finished that, you haven't finished this, you haven't finished that, right? So as a result of all these unfinished cycles of action, it is no different than if you have a lot of programs running in the background of your computer or your phone. What happens to your computer and what happens to your phone if you have a multitude of other applications that are operating in the background? What happens to your processor speed on your computer or phone?
It slows down.
Slows it down, right? Okay.
Mhm.
Because the computers and the cell phones have a limited amount of processing speed. And if there's other things working in the background, it's taken away from the speed at which that phone can operate. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when we go through this study tech, what we're going to do is we're going to remove that background information in order to speed up that processor. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. As we complete these cycles of action in our environment, then that's something I don't have to even think about anymore. What happens? I get more attention units back.
Right.
Get more life.
Okay. Let's see. So a barrier is any kind of limiting idea, whether emotional or physical. Could we get everyone to go on mute? Get some feedback from somewhere. Okay, thank you. This is a quote, one of my favorite quotes. This is like the foundation of everything that I do with regards to study. And this is from Torchlight for America, page 48. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan says, a while ago, I coined the phrase, he who gives the diameter of your knowledge prescribes the circumference of your activity. If you gain a limited knowledge, then you restrict the possibilities of what you can and will achieve. The capacity of man's brain is infinite. Therefore, the greater one's knowledge grows, the greater becomes one's sphere of activity until it encompasses and reflects mastery of self and mastery of the universe. We've probably seen this 1,000 times, and we'll see it 1,000 times more because there's just a wealth of information in that one little small paragraph. Okay, the more we expand, and we're going to go through a little quick exercise we want to add some mass to this so we can understand the concept. The more we increase the diameter, automatically the circumference, when we look at it mathematically, will increase. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Beautiful quote.
Okay. Now there's a cycle of action. For those, does everyone understand what the cycle of action is based on the Dianetics?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
We've probably mentioned it at every Zoom meeting. And I use this for whenever I study any subject. I don't look at it as trying to memorize information. I look at the different concepts based on cycles of action. And just for me personally, it has made a tremendous difference with regards to anytime I have to take a test for work or anything I've had to study in order to teach it. I teach based on what's called the cycles of action.
Do you mind going over that?
Oh,
What a
I
cycle of
will.
action is?
Oh, yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Most likely. One of the examples that we've used before is this. When you have a cycle of action, the basic cycle of action is start, change, and then stop. That's the basic. Okay. Anything that we study or anything that we do is a cycle of action. Anything that we do, we have to first start the process of doing it, correct? Okay. And once we start the process, there's a process of change. And then once we complete that, then that cycle of action has stopped. Does that make sense?
Yes. And the change could be either inside us or outside ourselves?
Yes, ma'am. Inside or outside. We came into the nation. That was a start. We've all have changed because none of us are the same individual we were when we first came in the nation. Does that make sense?
Correct.
That's the change. Now, we might complete a cycle of action, but once we complete a cycle of action, what we do is we just start another cycle of action. Does that make sense? Okay. Another example of a cycle of action is if we look at Lost Found Muslim lesson number 2, question number 1. Okay. Who made Holy Quran or Bible? How long ago? Will you tell us, why does Islam renew her history every 25,000 years? So we know in the year 1, the scientists wrote the Holy Quran of this cycle, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the change is all that they wrote that would take place, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that cycle stopped at what year? Talking about this cycle that we're currently in.
400 years ago. But
No, not
over
400 years ago. Now, remember, we're taught that in this current cycle, normally the original man writes his history every 25,000 years, correct?
Oh, right. So
Okay.
it hasn't stopped?
Well, This cycle, remember, the scientists only could see up to the year 15,000, and that there was a light that was so bright they couldn't see beyond that, correct?
Yes, sir.
And we've been taught that the Savior is writing the history for the last 10,000 years. Has everyone heard that before?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
What was that, Sister Shayla?
I didn't know I was on mute all that time. Okay.
Okay. So in writing history to equal our home circumference a year to every mile, that's like a cycle of action. And whenever the 25,000 years has ended, what do the scientists do? They write another Quran for another cycle of 25,000 years, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now there's an expanded explanation of a cycle of action in that it's start, growth, conservation, decay, and then stop. These are two you have the basic cycle of action, then you have an expanded cycle of action, okay? When you think of, right now, I haven't had a bean pie in so long, but I'm thinking of when you bake a bean pie, you have to start the process of getting everything together, correct?
Mhm.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
So you start the process. The start is the idea, I'm going to bake a bean pie. Okay, now growth could be, I get all my ingredients together. I mix my dry with dry and wet with wet. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And so the conservation is the process of the mixing of all the ingredients together and putting that in the oven. The decay could be the cooking of the bean pie. And then the end of the cycle is when the bean pie is pulled out and it's put on top of the stove in order to cool off. That's a cycle of action. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you look at Surah number 10, ayat number 24, it says this: in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. The likeness of this world's life is only as water, which we send down from the clouds. Then herbage of the earth of which men and cattle eat grows luxuriantly thereby, until when the earth puts on its golden raiment and it becomes adorned, and its people think that they are masters of it. Our command comes to it by night or by day, so we render it as reaped seed produce, as though it had not flourished yesterday. Thus do we make clear the messages for a people who reflect. Now, another place you can look at cycles of action is when you look at study guide number 2. And that is, study guide number 2 is called what? We know study guide number 1 is mixed feelings and controversy.
Is it building will?
Not building the will. Not building. You got one word right.
Building human potential.
Building human potential.
Potential,
Okay.
yeah.
So when you look at mixed feeling and controversy, just for a split second, if you were to, and this would be a topic for another Zoom meeting in the future, God willing. When you look at mixed feelings and controversy through the language of Dianetics, wouldn't mixed feelings be the same as aberration?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And wouldn't controversy be dramatization?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm.
So when you look at study guide number 1, this is just taking a little side step for a quick second. When you read, the reading for study guide number 1 is Surah 7, I believe, ayat 59 through 141. And it gives you the histories of all these different prophets and the people to which they were sent, correct? Okay.
I gotta read that, brother Luke.
Say again?
I gotta read that.
Okay. And if you look, because it talks about Thamud and it talks about Shuaib and it talks about Lot and it talks about, the different prophets. And in every storyline that it shares with regards to each individual prophet, it's showing how they handles mixed feeling and controversy. And whenever you read about the prophet, there's three basic key elements. One, you have the prophet. Two, you have the people to which the prophet was sent. And three, you have a chief or a pharaoh that works in opposition to the prophet, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you have a consequence for those that did not listen to what the prophet brought, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a statement that was made by the chief or the pharaoh with regards to the prophet. Now, if you take each one of those concepts, you can connect it to Dianetics. If you take the concept and you internalize it. And here's one way of looking at it. If you look at the word pharaoh and you look at the word chiefs of the people, and if you look at that in Arabic, it's actually describing characteristics of the reactive mind.
Mm.
So we all have a pharaoh or a chief within ourselves, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The people to whom the prophet is sent, we could say represents the will or control of this messed body. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And if you look at how the pharaohs and the chiefs of the people, they say the messenger is a liar, he's a deceiver, he's this, that, and the other. Those are your demon circuits, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then the consequences, the storm, there's one where it says there was an earthquake that left them motionless in their abodes. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, motionless in their abodes is synonymous with being stuck on the time track.
You're stuck on the contract. Yes, sir.
There you go. So we can take the self-improvement and study it externally, as you were saying, Sister Raynell, but we can also take the same study guides and get a deeper understanding and appreciation for the tech. And the tech can give us a better appreciation for the self-improvement study guides by looking at it externally, but also looking at it internally. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
And what ayat is that, Brother Lukman?
When you look at study guide number 1, I'm almost 99.9, if not 100% sure that the reading for study guide number 1 is Holy Quran, Surah 7, ayats 59 through ayats 141.
Okay. And then I have my Quran open, and you mentioned the abode and us being stuck there on the time track. In Surah 10, Jonah, ayat 25, it says, and Allah invites to me abode of peace and guides whom he pleases to the right path. And I have that marked. I just opened the Quran, and I have Dianetics written next to it. So
now, what would be the abode of peace in Dianetic language?
being audited. And,
Okay, we can say that.
and yes,
How about on the tone scale?
the abode of peace on the tone scale would be level 40, but above, I would say boredom.
Yes,
Rising above.
mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. So you see how there's equivalent between the way Allah gives it to us in the Holy Quran in the form of an allegory, but we can make a comparison to what L. Ron Hubbard gives us in the text, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else there, Sister Sharon?
No, sir.
Okay, praise be to
Thank
Allah.
you.
Thank you. Sister Shayla. You're on mute, Sister Shayla.
The study guide, I have never studied it externally. I have always thought it was for us internally. It never occurred to me that it never did.
Well,
that it's talking about mastery of self,
mhm.
basically what the study guide is. But as you are connecting these terminologies, I can see it. I never saw it that way before, though.
Praise
Thank you.
be to Allah. What I strive to do is when I study one subject, I try to look at it on multiple levels. How can I look at that from different angles and apply it? And here's one of the thoughts that come to mind. And I was just thinking about Brother Batin yesterday. One day he taught a class, and remember when he spoke about what's called the fundamentals? Who remembers when Brother Batin
Yes, sir.
fundamental?
Yes, sir.
That was a bomb that was dropped that transformed my whole outlook to another. It took the outlook to another degree. And in the concept of what's called the fundamental, Brother Batin was a musician, for those that don't know. So he taught the subject one day from the level of music. I think Sister Sharon, you might have been there when he taught this subject, correct? Sister Sharon?
Yes, sir, I was.
Okay. And just a quick synopsis of what it means is whenever you have a musical note, when you're studying music, a musical note, you hear a note, but that note is actually composed of up to 13 other notes that are hidden within that note.
Mm-hmm.
And the base of that note is called the fundamental. And we could take that same concept and understand it from the perspective of when you look at each of the lessons given to us in the Supreme Wisdom, each lesson is like a fundamental. And the more we study and recite that lesson, the more we go back to the beginning and go over it again and pick up the additional data as we study each lesson, what you're going to find is more and more information is going to be revealed through that lesson. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now,
Absolutely.
since you're reading the lesson in your Supreme Wisdom, those lessons that are written in the Supreme Wisdom have not changed as you read them, correct?
Correct.
So what has changed and where did this new wisdom come from?
Yeah. Mine.
It comes from within.
Mhm.
Okay. Anyway, I don't want to go flying off on a tangent. So in this ayat, there is a cycle of action. And if you look at all those words, can you see the words that became green?
Yes.
Okay. So this ayat we can look at from an allegorical standpoint that also represents a cycle of action. So when you look at the cycle of action, we have the first part is called start. So based on the ayat, the start is when Allah sends water down from the clouds, correct? Okay. Then growth, the second stage of a cycle of action. In the ayah, it says the herbage grows luxuriantly. Excuse me. So the water comes down as the start of the process, and then the herbage does what? The plant life grows. Conservation is now the earth puts on a golden raiment and becomes adorned. So we have a step-by-step process. The water comes down, the plants grow, the earth transforms. Does that make sense? Does that flow? Then decay is when we reap. We begin to take the seed produce. Whatever was growing now is taken away. Does that make sense? Okay. And then the stop is as though it had not flourished yesterday. Can you see the cycle of action there?
Yes.
Okay. Cycle of action. We started studying the Dianetics. Okay. Did we grow as a result? Did our knowledge base increase as we studied the tech? Yes. Okay. Did we begin to transform and change from who we used to be as a result of the increase of our study of the tech? Okay.
Yeah.
Did the Negro in us begin to decay?
Yes.
Okay. Did our ignorance begin to decay?
Yes.
Sister Sharon is laughing.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so now, we have, so now if you look at where we are today, we could say, let's look at this as the endpoint of a certain cycle of action. So we have changed. So a lot of good has taken place and a lot of bad has been removed, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So now what happens is, what do? We act like the original man. When we complete a cycle of action, what do? We start another cycle of action. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So that's just another place, but there's many places in the Holy Quran. When we look at the way Allah has worded some of the ayats, if you look, you say, wow, that's a cycle of action.
Right.
Because now can you almost see the picture in your mind of the rain coming down, the plants growing, everything changing. And then, you have a certain season where things like wintertime, things begin to die. And then it was almost as if that plant life was never there, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, study tech. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of this. In the memo, it says, follow the study technology. The study tech is a scientific process that, when followed, guarantees a learner masters and learns what is being studied. I can profess to the study tech. If you go to Scientology.org, you can take the basic course of study tech for free. And I recommend, if you have not taken that course, take it. It is well worth the time. You can probably complete it within one day. It's not a long course, and it's for the low price of free. It's a great tool to use to study.
Are you talking about the many courses, Brother Lukman?
Those mini courses, yes, ma'am, at Scientology.org. I recommend taking all of those.
Yes, sir. I took all of them and have every last certificate. Yes, sir.
Oh, you did?
Oh, yeah. It said free. I said, I'm jumping into it.
Jumping into it for free.
That's right.
It's great.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing.
It is.
According to L. Ron Hubbard, much study has gone into the origin and function of words, but very little study on the effect words have on the human being. Okay, there's a key point here. The study technology helps us identify the barriers and physical manifestations that people develop and show us what to do to handle or solve the problems. So basically, a quick overview of the study tech is this. Whenever we study anything, there are certain physical manifestations that will take place. And if any of these manifestations take place, this is a key to let us know that we have kind of strayed away from study and we're just looking at the book. If we're reading a book, we're just looking at, we're not even studying anymore. There's going to produce some physical manifestations. What I hope to share with the believers is this idea. If we understand the basic concept of what it is to audit a pre-clear, when we look at the elements that are going to be shown to us in this, 9 times out of 10, if you understand that concept, what we're actually doing is we're auditing the subject that we're studying. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. As we audit an individual, don't we sometimes look for what's called the semantics?
Yes.
Okay, the semantic represents something physical that occurred during the time of the engram, correct?
Correct.
Okay. As we study and we hit these barriers, it's going to produce semantics.
Correct.
And when these semantics show up, this is a sign that we have missed the mark.
Hmm.
Okay. There's going to be a physical manifestation. And as we're auditing someone and we encounter emotion, that is telling us that we're getting close to the engram as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then as we get close to the engram, what does the reactive mind do? It produces what's called the engramic commands. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You have the deniers, you have the let's see, the deniers, the holders, the misdirectors, the groupers, yes, the bouncers. Everyone's familiar with those engramic commands?
Yes.
Okay. So these are
No,
terms
sir.
that are used when we're auditing someone. These phrases will come out of the reactive mind to keep us from getting to the root of that engram. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Our mind is going to play the same tricks on us when we're studying. And I'm going to show how there's a correspondence here with the hopes that it'll make it easier to remember and understand. So we're going to add some math to this real quick. Individuals are equations. Now, this is based on where L. Ron Hubbard just said that some of us have never, we study the origin of the words and functions of the words, but we have not studied how the words affect the individual. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, some of us are going to go up on a time track with this one. Is there a friend or family member that you know of that can say a certain word and they do it purposely to irritate the hell out of you? Has that ever happened?
Yes.
Yes.
In other words, has someone pushed your button?
Yes.
Okay. So some of our family members know if I say this, I'm going to get a rise out of someone. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Sister Raynell, it seems like you went back on the time track for a quick second.
Right. I couldn't pull one up, but then, oh yes, I would.
Okay. Okay. So it's just certain words can have an effect on us. And we may not understand why that word has the effect. Okay. So individuals are like equations. Okay. An equation has three basic components. And we're going to do a little quick math just to add some math to what we're talking about. And this should make it interesting. So the cycle of action is start, change, stop. So your start is your input. The change is the equation that you're given. And the stop is the output. Now, I'm going to give math so we can understand this. Okay, start, change, stop. When you work in math, you have an input, you have the actual equation, and when you put an input in the equation, it's going to produce an output, yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, if I say 5 plus A equals 10, then A has to equal what?
5.
5. Okay, so the letter A is a variable that represents the input. And in order for this to be a correct statement, I have to put in the proper input and make it equal 10. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
Yes.
can you define the word variable? Physical manifestation. So
I was just about to go down that road.
Okay, good.
Because when you define the word variable is it really the basic understanding is that which can vary. But when you look at one of the terms that's synonymous with variable, you'll come across the word aberrant. Okay. Okay, let's tie this to the lessons. There are some currents cold and warm and some that are swift and changeable, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so variable is changeable. So if I say 5 plus A equals 10, that variable is where the aberration could possibly be if you don't understand algebra. Does that make sense? If you try to say that A equals 10, what have you just produced? An aberration. Why? Because 10 plus 5 can't be 10, correct?
Right.
Okay. In other words, whenever we give our own definition or value to certain variables and we try to make stuff work and it doesn't work, that's called what? Aberration. Yes?
Yes, sir.
That's A equals A equals A. That is when we try to force our solution into a problem, but we can't make it work. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Whenever we're trying to solve a problem using the same data that's given us incorrect outputs, that's called what? Insanity, yes?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mathematics, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said this about numbers. He said that's why they're called numbers, because they're numb. There's no feeling. We can't force equations to equal certain things because numbers are very objective. And I'm going to give us an example in a moment. But does everyone kind of understand the basic concept of an equation?
Yes, sir.
Your input, what's on one side of your equal sign, has to equal what's on the other side. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And one of the golden rules of that is whatever you do to one side, you have to do what to the other side, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, let's stretch the diameter of our thinking for just a minute. If you look at that same concept, there's something on the left side of that equal sign, and it's equal to what's on the right side, correct? What if the left side of the equation represents the mind and the other side represents the messed body? Would that not imply that whatever affects the mind affects the body, and whatever affects the body affects the mind?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Where else have we seen that in the teachings? How to Eat to Live. Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, the brain, I believe he says the brain and the digestive system are I'm paraphrasing it, are connected. Whatever affects one affects the other, right?
Right.
Yes, sir.
So when we're aberrating the mind, does that not produce an aberration in the body?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's called, what's aberration in the body is called what in Dianetics?
Aberration.
Somatics or something.
Can we say it again? Someone said it.
Somatics or something like
Somatic.
that.
The psychosomatic illness.
Psychosomatic.
Okay, the psychosomatic illness is really when the incorrect thought is converted to incorrect chemistry, and that incorrect chemistry produces the psychosomatic illness. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so when we look at the different illnesses that we might be suffering from, the body is what we see that's giving us insight as to an imbalance that's taking place in an area where we can't see. Does that make sense? Okay. And that's really, and we won't go too far down this road, but when you deal with the concept of what's called holistic medicine, you're really reading the body because the body is telling you what's wrong internally. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Have we ever seen in the Holy Quran where it says in that day, men's hands and feet will speak to them? Have we ever heard that before?
I'm sure I've read it.
Okay. When I read that ayah, and I'll try to find it before we leave if I get the moment. The fact that men's hands and feet will speak to them, I looked at that from the standpoint, my opinion, is that when we look at our hands and feet, meaning if we look at our body and illnesses, our illnesses will reveal to us something that's going on internally. Okay. And there is a I can't remember the name of the doctor. There is a book that talks about how if you don't weep or cry externally, your organs will weep internally, meaning if you can't get the emotion out, the emotion will convert and go inwardly, and all that energy, because really the pain and suffering that we go through that we try to relieve during Dianetics, they call it releasing the charge. But when you look at it from a medical standpoint, we're looking at a chemical called ACTH. And this chemical is part of the stress sequence. And if we can't release that stress chemical from the body, it begins to diminish the immune system and opens the door to sickness. This is why women usually live longer than men, because what happens? Women will cry, men are taught not to. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
And whenever we cry, this is the body's way of removing that stress chemical. That's a whole nother down the road. Go ahead, Sister Denise.
I think that Surah is man evidence against himself. It's like not taking care of certain areas of your body. I'll say, for example, your teeth, and you wonder why the pain is in your mouth, or not taking care of your feet, which we stand on every day.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, you know, what have we done with ourselves? And it's evidence to us what we've done to us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we start acting up or cracking up, I should say, inside of us. So that's what I think it's the like the resurrection, when you were saying words, you know, of the resurrection of the mind, when you come to full cycle on where you are in yourself, you know, and your weaknesses. I mean, all of it comes, like you look at your house and it's in chaos and it talks to you, you know, like, what have you done? You know, this is what I look like.
Mm-hmm.
Why have you neglected me? You know, and that's when your body speaks to you and says, what have you done to me? What, you know, what have I mean, I've always had my feet for you. I know it sounds like, you know, like
we get a mental test.
Huh?
No, I
You need
heard
to stop and get you some tea.
there's some background.
In there.
Sister Deborah, could you
Oh.
mute, please?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Oh, don't worry
Muting.
about it. No problem. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Sister.
So I thought you was asking a question. So you know, we messed ourselves up, you know, and it's like, you know, your body's crying out like, what are you doing to me? You know, why are you doing this? And so the resurrection process is not only resurrection, is like things coming up out of you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I think about that definition, it's like it's coming up out of you, where we are for real. You know, it's like, no, you can't fool yourself. Okay, remember all those times you didn't brush your teeth, you like, I'm too tired or whatever. Well, it's coming. You know, all these things is coming back. They're coming back at you. You know, I know you just looked at that treadmill. You didn't get on it, but your mind said, I'm down here for the treadmill. But your body never got on it. And you wonder why everything is caking in and caking up on you, because you haven't released it. You know, you haven't exerted any energy, except for a spoon or fork or something like that, you know, to put in your mouth. But what if I think, what's up with that body, man? You know, it's like, when you gonna know I'm being chemical, but Mr. say we take it better when it's
Yes, we
laughable, when you can laugh at it, So that's what I was thinking as you was talking about looking at words and how the words really affect you. Because I'm thinking resurrection, like, oh, I know the truth. Yes, you do. The truth of yourself now.
Mm-hmm.
You know what's going on with yourself. Thank you, beloved. That's all I had to
No,
say.
thank
That
you.
was my
In what you're saying, excuse me, it reminded me of this same, see, if we begin to look at our lessons like equations, then we can extract the principle from the lesson, then we can apply it in different areas. And I'll give you an example. Based on as you were talking, my mind went to Lost Found Muslim lesson number 2, question number 8. So there might be some days that we might not brush our teeth. So what you're saying is that the tartar collects as a fine mist that a naked eye can hardly detect? Is that what you're saying? Tooth decay,
yes, sir.
will increase.
All of
So that gives us a principle in life, whether it's greatness or it's not greatness, both things accumulate in a way that seems insignificant, correct? But over time, it becomes great. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
When you look at the hurricanes that go through and tear up Florida, or if you look at all the snowstorms out off of the coast of California, all those storms began a cycle of action. They started as water evaporating in a fine mist that the naked eye can hardly detect. Yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. But as that mist ascends higher and collecting with different currents of the atmosphere until she becomes heavier than gravitation, then she distills back. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That principle applies in anything. And I don't know why this is popping up my head, but Sister Raynell, let me throw a pitch at you for a minute. Have you read through anything in Dianetics and it was that you couldn't get it to click, and then you read something and something made everything click and you understood it?
Yes.
Okay. So the more as you were reading, what was happening? The information was gathering in a fine mist that the naked eye can hardly detect. But then when it became heavier than gravitation, it distilled back. So it's like the knowledge comes up, wisdom accumulates, and then it distills back as understanding. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. What are we doing? We're taking a principle from the lessons, but we're applying it to other things in life now. So when the minister says we have a book full of formulae, we actually have a book. There's a reason why it's called the Supreme Wisdom, and we have to memorize the lessons. And in memorization, it becomes what? It becomes a part of us so that we're always reciting it over and over and over again. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's a tangent we just went. Okay, 3 basic components. Now here's some math so we kind of understand this. Circumference equals pi times d. How many of us remember this formula? We've dealt with this formula many times. Okay, that's a basic formula. Okay, that's about as basic as you can get. We know that the d is the diameter. That's your input. And if I input a number for diameter, it should give me the circumference, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that's just a basic equation. So if I say the circumference, if I say the diameter is 7,926, that's the diameter of the what? Come on,
Can you
students.
repeat the question, Brother Lukman?
The 7,926 represents
Diameter
what?
of the earth. I'm sorry. Chaos.
Yes.
The diameter of the earth.
That's the diameter of the earth.
Hold on.
Now,
What was the question, Brother Lukman?
The 7,926 represents what?
Okay, yes, sir.
Okay. Now, those of us that came into the nation perhaps 20 or 30 years ago, we had to recite the question, we had to recite the answer, and we had to recite all 20 actual facts in order. Who remembers that?
I do.
Sir.
So 7,926 on your actual facts. I believe that's actual fact either number 2 or number 3, but the diameter of the earth is 7,926 miles. When you do that math, it comes out to 24,895.566, and then you round up. That's how we calculate the circumference of the planet Earth. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now here's just a little quick sidebar. If we understand that formula and we understand how to apply it to our Earth, meaning we apply it to self, if we have the actual facts of the other planets, can we also calculate the circumference of those planets?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, what that teaches us is that as we understand the rules of thought and we can apply those rules to ourselves, when we're actually auditing an individual, we are using the same rules because the rules are universal, and that allows us to get into the mind and understand the aberration of other individuals. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So in order for us to be very good auditors, we have to be able to apply these principles to gain a better knowledge of ourselves. And does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This right here is this was just a quick little demonstration of using math to understand a basic concept of an equation. You have to have an input, then you have to do the calculation, and then it's going to produce an output. Cycles of action again. You start with the origin of the word, then there's the function of the word, but we have not really examined the effect the word has on the individuals. Does that make sense? How many of us have studied self-analysis?
I just started it.
Okay. Self-analysis at the end of the book, it gives you all those lists of words, correct?
Mm-hmm.
It says, think of the time when someone yelled. Think of the time when you saw a bird. Think of a time when you, so here you have all these words that are on these lists. And as we go through the list, that word is like an input that produces our movement on the time track and produces a memory, or takes us back down the time track, correct?
Yes, sir.
Correct.
Okay. So those lists are like, these are inputs that are placed in our own mind, which is we're the equation. And then we go back on the time track and we can remember certain instances when certain things took place and certain people that were there and different things. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Okay. This is why L. Ron Hubbard provided is so profound, because he took the science of the mind, something that is unseen, and produced the mathematics and the physics to allow us to study what can't be seen. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. The book of Romans, chapter 1, verse 20 says, for the invisible things of the world from the beginning are clearly seen through the things that are made. And I always thought that verse from the Bible is so profound, because it's telling us that if you study what we see, it'll give us insight as to what we don't see. We can't see the mind, correct?
Correct.
But by studying creation, we can study the effect the unseen mind has on the physical universe.
Mm-mm.
Okay. A simple word can act as an input, meaning a stimulus that produces an output, which is a response. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Would anyone like to share a word that either at a point in time would affect you or kind of still affects you? Sister Sharon.
Yes, sir. I don't like when somebody tell me to calm down. That sends me through the roof. So it still bothers me a little bit, not a lot. I don't go into a rage like I used to. So
Okay.
yes, sir.
Okay. Forgive me for laughing, but when you said that, my mind went back to the story you just told us on Sunday at the org.
Uh-huh. And if I hear someone say calm down, or the other word is combative, like the guy used, I just put on a straight face and I just look at them.
Mhm.
Nonverbal communication. I just look at them like, okay. And that's how I deal with it. I just stop all communication. I just use my face. That's it.
And that speaks volumes.
Absolutely. Because at that moment, I'm able to hear them better. Once I stop, I'm able to hear everything that's coming out of their mouths.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear the truths that come, and then I'm able to respond better.
Rising above emotion into the mind and thinking of God.
That's it.
Praise be to Allah. Go ahead, Sister Deborah.
My word is passive aggressive.
Yes.
That triggers me because I've often been told that I'm passive aggressive. And like Sister Sharon, I don't go off as much as I used to. I'm not as combative as I used to. I kind of calm down. It's like, okay, they must be telling me this for a reason. Everybody can't be wrong. So I had to, kind of back up and look at myself. Now, when I look at myself, I'm sweet. I'm so gentle. I get along with everybody, but too many people have told me I am passive aggressive. So I am, taking a more closer look at myself and say, okay, maybe I am. And it's usually the brothers that tell me that.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason for that?
Well, sometimes you got to watch out for brothers because they might try to use language.
Yes, sir. Yes,
sometimes, an individual, because I'm with Sister Sharon. If you say that to me, my whole thought is some people will use that because really your strength intimidates them.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we have to paint individuals into a corner to try to take away from the fact that this individual is too much for us to handle. Does that make sense?
Yes, because I've been told that I'm also, what's the word? I'm too hard. I'm too hard on the brothers. I'm too hard. And I usually hear this from brothers. I'm too hard. You're too, you need to break down that wall that you have up.
Well,
and I'm in my mind, I'm like, well, it's up for a reason.
It could be you're too hard, or it could be that the brother who's saying is too soft. I mean, that's just my opinion, but
Yes, sir. But I am trying to study myself,
Yes,
to make sure. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Oh, you're absolutely right, because one thing that the minister says is whenever you find that spot or blemish, what are you supposed to apply?
Cleaner.
That's the spot cleaner, right? So he says that's a blessing if you can find that. So praise be to Allah. Sister Denise, did you have something else? I thought I saw you come off mute there for a split second.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brother Lukman, is my hand up?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. I'll put it down. What I was thinking about when someone said, you know too much.
Mm-hmm.
And I said too much. Yeah, you know too much. You're you'll never get a husband. You'll you'll never get a husband because you know too much. And I said, so he wants a dumb wife? Or, I mean, what's up with this? I'm not supposed to know much. My brother said, you'll never get anybody because you know too much, and we like airheads. Yeah, sisters that don't think.
Mm.
I said, wow, that's interesting.
But now look at the opposing. Look at what's not being said. You know too much is the same as saying the brothers don't know enough.
Mhm.
So who's really ignorant then? But we'll always say steel sharpens steel, correct?
Yes, sir.
So if a sister is strong-minded, if the brother really wants the sister, then that means he's got to step his game up, right?
Yes, sir. Buy some platform.
All right.
Shoes, a platform shoes. I mean, really, I was saying, wow, like lower your standards. Really?
Mhm.
Really?
That's what I do. So yes, sir. I'm glad you bringing some balance to that thing. So if this is what's said, look behind the words, as Malcolm told the brother. He said that's black and that's white, but look behind the words that white is good and black is not so good. It's like you saying it without saying it and say, I didn't say that. Well, what are you saying? Yes, sir. I don't want to play words, but yeah, when Malcolm told the brother, look into the words,
Yes.
in the Malcolm X movie, yes, sir. That was the part that stayed with me. And then he started reading it. Whoa, okay. I didn't see that. Yes, sir. So that was me. That was my thing. And it's like, my son fell. I said, "What? You're a straight A student. How you go from that to D's and F?" He said, "That's what I had to do if I wanted to hang with them, Mama. I couldn't I couldn't be
Wow.
smart."
Mhm.
I
Wow.
said, "Wow, they worth that much, huh?" I didn't know what to say to him. I just stopped pulling my hair out and let him deal with his own consequences. Yes, sir. So that's what it was.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
No,
Thank you, beloved.
thank you, sister. Has anyone ever heard the minister make this statement that when he listens to someone, he doesn't listen to what you say, he listens to your intention?
I feel like I've heard that before.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the minister, he based on that, he's looking past our words.
Mhm.
He's listening to the thought that is producing what we say. In other words, sisters do this on a level with children. You don't listen to what the child is saying, you listen to how they say it, and then you realize the child is lying, correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Someone who just said that with a smile on her face.
Sister Sharon.
Okay, I saw your smile behind that black screen. Okay. This is why someone can say a word and push our buttons. We all have buttons, and then the more we kind of straight wire ourselves, we can kind of diminish or reduce the power of certain words to the point where someone can say certain things, and then in our mind we look at them and we're like, oh. In our mind we're saying, oh, you're trying to get a rise out of me. That's really cute. I see you though. That's when we're moving into the mind of God. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Cycles of action, barrier detection. We're going to try to move swiftly so we can kind of bring this to a close. So in our study, we're going to see how first we identify the physical manifestation. There's something that will take place on a physical level that'll show us that our studying has actually, even though we're sitting there looking at the book is looking back at us now. We're not gathering, we're not making any progress anymore. There's a physical manifestation. And we're going to be able to identify the barrier based on the physical manifestation. And then once the physical manifestation is known and we understand what particular barrier is present, now we can solve the equation, which is really our own mind. Does that make sense? Barrier number one, lack of mass. Okay, lack of mass. Lack of mass is when you don't have the actual thing you are studying in front of you. If you are studying about the moon and you don't have the actual moon, you can substitute with a picture, video, or model of the moon. So this is where the concept of the demo kit comes into play. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So the demo kit, you can, and anyone that has done coursework at an org, there's that bowl of little trinkets, corks, and pieces of glass and different things that are in that bowl. And when there's a concept that you can't fully understand because you don't have the mass, you use the demo kit as a means of giving mass to the concept that you're studying. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When you look at the problem book, okay, the problem book says this, that he's given us a mathematical way to study our miserable condition, correct?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the problem book, in my humble opinion, is a group of mathematical problems that are providing demo kits in order for us to study our own self. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So as we go through the problem book, and the reason why we don't go through the problem book is going to be based on one of these three barriers of study. The problem book is an area that, you know, generally speaking, we treat the problem book like a Christian might treat the book of Revelations, totally avoid it. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Have we ever experienced that where we thought about the problem book, we start maybe problem number one, and then we just blow, meaning we stop studying the problem book? And why is that? Because 9 times out of 10, we have these mathematical engrams, yes?
Mhm.
We have a fear of numbers, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We have a fear of equations. And based on that fear, we don't have the ability to confront. So the problem book is like the Black Panther. Does that, I'm not talking about Wakanda.
Right.
I'm talking about that Black Panther that we avoid, that's sitting in front of us and we don't want nothing to do with it. That's the problem.
Right.
Okay. So we start studying a concept, and then if we don't have a demo kit, what happens? There's a physical manifestation. I'm gonna give us the specifics, but it will produce low-toned behavior as we're studying. Okay.
Hmm.
Here's an example. Have you ever been in the course room at the org and you're studying, and then one of the Scientologists will come up and they'll pose a question. Did you go past a word that you don't understand? Or they detected something that showed that you're no longer studying. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
What response did that produce in some of us?
Negative
Sleepy.
response.
A negative response, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So here's the physical manifestations when there's a lack of mass. It says students who are suffering from lack of mass generally become angry, feel bent or squashed, suffer headaches, the eyes hurt, and even boredom sets in. Have you ever been reading and then you do this, you go, ah.
Mm-hmm.
You've done that before, right?
Yes, sir.
And then in our minds, we think, I can't study because I'm tired.
Right.
Okay. So I looked at this, the headache and the eyes hurting is the body's way of saying, I need to see what I'm studying. Okay. I need a physical object to go along with this concept. So the emotions that manifest, because this has happened to me many times. I'm in the courtroom. When I'm flowing in my studies, I don't like to be interrupted. So I try, if I feel a yawn coming, I try to stifle that, because I know as soon as you yawn, here they come. You come across something, and you're just like, my mind, I'm thinking, well, you just leave me alone. But that's their job. They detect it and they come over and they have to correct it. I respect it now, but before, always that was one of my buttons. Go ahead, Sister Anya.
When
You're on mute, Sister Anya.
oh, okay, yes, sir. When you mentioned that earlier about pushing buttons, and I was trying to think of one, but that you just raised one for me. When I used to be at the org, and I would be tired before I got to the org, and I was already yawning before I got to the org. So sitting there trying to go through the courses, and I'm yawning, and they kept coming over, and that would really annoy me. And it's like, how do you get past that to let them know that you're physically tired anyway, and that you're not sitting there, you know, that it wasn't something that you didn't understand in what you were reading. So I never found a way to deal with that.
Yeah, that's it. That's if you come up with that one, please share that, because that's a key. So the emotions that manifest as if we're studying and we get to that point where our head starts to hurt. The word bent, if you clear the word bent, think of being bent out of shape. It means just be upset. The eyes are hurting. So it's like the eyes, the body's telling you, I need to see what I'm studying. So you have anger, you have boredom. The physical manifestation is, the headaches or the eyes hurting. Again, pain in the eyes and headache is a sign that mass is needed. Go ahead, Sister Sharon.
Yes, sir. I know the yawning is a boil off also. So when you're studying and you yawn, could that be mistaken as you're not understanding what you're reading, or you went past a word that you didn't understand? It could just be a boil off. I know I'm asking that because sometimes when I'm studying, I'll yawn going past something that I read and is similar to what I've been through. And I'll run it in my head and I'll continue to read. Then I'll start yawning. But when I was over at the org the other day, it was a lady, she kept yawning and yawning. I'm like, what the hell's wrong with her? So I was like, you know, is she not understanding, or is she having a boil off? Because it was like every 2 seconds she kept yawning, like, and I'm like, damn it, I need to leave. So what's the difference in that?
Okay, let me ask you this. Was it a yawn, or was it someone saying,
No, it was a yawn, like,
was it a yawn? Okay.
And I'm turned around and looked at her. She kept doing it. I'm like, what the heck is wrong with this lady?
That you know what? That's an interesting concept, because is it possible that someone can go through boil off as they're studying?
Right.
Possibility. But I also know that something that is similar to that, because I do this a lot myself, but to this day, I don't know why I do this. I could be sitting there and out of the blue, I go, and I don't know why I'm doing it. And sometimes my wife would say, what's wrong? I say, nothing. But I take a deep inhale and an exhale. In Dianetics, that's called misemotion. And in the Holy Quran, it talks about those who sigh. So that misemotion is a sign that something's there, even though you may not understand what's there, because it's part of an engram.
Mm-hmm.
I do that a lot myself, but to this day, I don't know why I do it.
Yes, sir.
A whole nother story, but is it possible? Hey, that sounds like an interesting concept. Matter of fact, I gotta write that down. And I gotta, again, I have to go study that to see if you actually can boil off while you're studying something, because you're actually touching on something that's connected to an engram. That's
Right.
that's an interesting concept. You gotta study that. Sister Shayla.
Am I, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Loud and clear.
Oh, if a person is yawning, it's a misunderstood word. Just that the person does not know that he or she has a misunderstood word, but it is a misunderstood word that they went by and they continue according to the text. That's exactly what I'm not saying it's not possible, because I never thought of it until Sister Angela presented it just now, or Sister Sharon.
Mhm.
That's a possibility, but according to the text, it's
Mhm.
exactly an MU.
Mhm.
And I just thought this was my first time in the Church of Scientology. I just thought that anytime I did, anytime I got bored or I would yarn, this woman would just automatically sit in front of me. And I just thought to myself, these people are smarter than what? I just thought she was the greatest teacher in the world, because she would just immediately sit in front of me. And I didn't know anything about study tech. And I just thought to herself, I said, why it is that every time I wanted to run out of this classroom, you would sit in front of me? And she was like, we'll get into that later. But it was such a magical experience for me. That's why I'm telling you, when you start yearning, and I did not want to go back and look up work, because I'm a lazy student. I want to go, like, tell me go back and tell me go to the door, because we move forward in those days. And she was like, so I don't know if everybody know how this study tech work, but like, she would take me back and clear it, and then I would continue. And it happened every time. So I don't, I have never thought of a boil off, but now that she said it, I'm like, maybe there's
Maybe.
something to that there. That's all.
And
Thank you.
I'm going to contact a Scientologist and get some clarification on that, because that sounds interesting. Again, someone posing a question that takes us outside the circumference of our activity. They expanding diameter of our thinking above and beyond. That's a good concept. Barrier number 2, too steep a gradient. A student has become confused in the process of learning and moving up on a gradient. So the emotion here is confusion. Okay, that's how it manifests. So when we're confused, then there's a cycle of action or a process. In mathematics, they're called algorithms. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, an algorithm is nothing more than a step-by-step process that is really also a cycle of action. You begin with a problem and you arrive at a solution. And there are rules that takes us down that road. Oh, Sister Tina laughed. And the rules in mathematics are called, what's the restrictive law of mathematics called? What's the basic rule of mathematics? Anyone that has been in the mathematics class, it's called what? PEMDAS, PEMDAS, PEMDAS. PEMDAS is the thing.
Parentheses, decimals.
Yep, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. That's the restrictive law of mathematics. You have to flow in that order.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
What's the physical manifestation? A person will kind of be in a whirl. They'll be confused, unsteady. So what do? You find out when you or the person studying was not confused, and then find out what new action he undertook, and then find out what he felt he understood well just before he got confused. You will find there's something in this area. So you go back to when a person understands a concept and to when they started to be confused, and the gradient that's missed is somewhere in between those 2 points. Okay.
Very good, Brother Luke.
The third barrier, the misunderstood word. This states that this is the most important barrier. At some point in our reading, you'll come across a word that you do not understand or may have the wrong understanding. This will create spiraling misunderstanding if not handled. A misunderstood word is like inputting the wrong input into an equation and produces a wrong answer. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay,
every time.
every time. So, and that's why some people, you might say certain things to them about certain words. They say, well, the way I look at the word is like this. What you're doing is you're trying to give your understanding in order to solve your equation, and you're as wrong as two left shoes.
Right.
Okay. So here's the emotion: disinterested, complaining, or fault finding. Okay. That's the emotions that come up. So when you look at the anger, that was a result of the lack of mass, right? Anger. This could be seen as covert hostility. But now if I'm complaining and fault finding, could that be the same as overt hostility?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so now we're at the level of 2.0, 1.5, and 1.1, correct? On the
Yes.
tone scale?
One.
Yes.
Mhm.
So here's the solution. You go back to when there was no trouble. And then when trouble began, the misunderstood word is in between those 2 points. So go back to when you understood the concept of what you were reading, and then where you kind of went off, and there's a word in between there somewhere. Now, here's an ayat in the Holy Quran. Oh, go ahead, Sister Shayla. Sister Ani, do you still have your hand up? I think that might have been from last time. Go ahead, Sister Shayla.
I just want to cautious the believers here. Listen, this is key right here, because sometimes we have the wrong meaning applied. So we don't understand, how could I have this wrong if I understand but you're not applying the correct word. You're not applying the word correctly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, English is a very illogical language for those that are, this is maybe for the English speaking people, it doesn't sound that way. It's very illogical. So when you, especially when you're coming from another language and you're making logic out of this language, it can trip you tremendously. So if you're experiencing these symptoms, trust and believe you have a misunderstood word. You might have worked the night before. You might be tired. Honestly, you are tired and you want to sleep. That is true. That would not be a good time to study. However, if you are experiencing this, it's very important that you go back, because what you will try to do as the intelligent being that you are, you'll try to move forward, because we overcome all obstacles in our path, right? But for you to do that faster, you need to go back and find your misunderstood word.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very important.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Sister Shayla. Sister Raynell.
Yes, I just wanted to share a misunderstood word I had. So when I was around 16, I had some little cousins who were in the church, and they had to recite this Bible verse. And the older people in my family were so happy about them reciting this verse. And it was shaped in sin and or born in sin and shaped in iniquity. So when I heard that and I was hearing it all the time, I automatically put iniquity with positive. Like I know sin is bad, so iniquity must be positive, right? And it wasn't until later, like well into my 20s, I realized that iniquity is like wicked, worse than sin, which really changed a whole outlook on how I seen a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. If we, and that's part of, if you get into what's called the student hat, which I started before the COVID, and when the COVID shut everything down, I didn't get a chance to finish. So I'm trying to complete my student hat. That's one of the things they try to do, is they try to clear up. There's certain words we have and use. And I don't know what, this is the way it comes to my mind. Remember In Living Color, where it showed that brother in the prison and he was just making up words and making up. Remember that In Living Color?
No,
That's just
That was before Sister Renel's time.
okay. but you know what I'm talking about, right? The
Yes.
brother, okay, he would try to sound real intelligent, but the words didn't make no sense. Okay, if we have time, I'll try to see if I can pull up the video real quick on YouTube, but that's basically what happens. There's certain words we use, and we use them because we know where they fit in the sentence. But if someone says, well, what's the meaning of that word? We can't define that word. We are like jackasses carrying books, basically. There's a lot of words we have, but if someone said define that word, L. Ron Hubbard said it like this: if you can't explain something in your own language, then you don't understand what you're talking about. I'm just paraphrasing. Okay. Here's one ayat in the Holy Quran that actually will summarize everything that we just looked at. Study text that's in the Holy Quran. There's an ayat that says, nay, they reject that whose knowledge they cannot compass and whose final sequel has not yet come to them. Okay. So here's a cycle of action, which is the start. Inability to compass knowledge. Okay. Change is inability to identify the final sequel. And what's the stop? Rejection of knowledge. Does that make sense? So in this ayat, we have a cycle of action that begins with the inability to compass knowledge. There's the inability to identify the final sequel. And then as a result of that, it causes a rejection of knowledge. Why have some of the believers chosen not to study the text based on the instructions that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has given us? And why is it, and there's nothing negative about this. I don't want to make anyone seem like I'm making this a negative. Why did some of us start the study and then we stopped? It's because there's the number one complaint that I've seen is that when we started reading the book Dianetics, the language that L. Ron Hubbard used was aggravating to some of the believers. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, sir. That's my reason.
It was annoying to some individuals because there's certain words, like there's an easier way to say that.
Right.
But you understand, that's his language. Now, I'm gonna give you an example. How many of us have seen the word extemporaneous before?
Extemporaneous. Yeah.
I just seen.
In closing the gap, the minister said he used the term extemporaneous. I thought that, to me, that was one of the heaviest words. Out of that whole book, Closing the Gap, is the word extemporaneous. But L. Ron Hubbard did it in so many places in Dianetics. What did it do? It caused us to say, and I'm not reading this book. And then you look at the size of the book. So the size of the book, and then trying to get through. I originally started to read Dianetics back when I was 15. I was in high school. 1985 was the first time I came across Dianetics. I might have gotten past chapter 1 or 2, and I was like, I don't understand what the hell this dude is talking about. Okay. It's all about words and language. So here's looking at the concept of compass and final sequel. When one fails to understand the elements of a subject, okay, every subject you study is composed of elements or parts, or fails to understand the reason behind the study of a subject, then one will reject the subject. Does that make sense, or do I need to go a little bit deeper into that?
You could go deeper.
Okay. If there's a certain, let's say there's a certain concept in math we're trying to study, okay? So if we look at that equation, we take a basic equation, that equation is composed of elements, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So when we had circumference equals pi times d, that's called algebra, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, algebra is mathematics that uses numbers and letters. Once we input numbers for each one of those letters, it's no longer algebra. It becomes what? Arithmetic, correct?
Got it. Yes.
Okay. But now if we don't understand why we're calculating the circumference, why do we need to know that? Okay. If we study any math subject, we have to understand what is the application of that? Why is that significant? And if we don't understand why the application is significant, then there's no reason for me to study that subject. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So we have to understand what's the final sequel. Why do I need to learn that? A lot of us in school, when we were in school, we probably made this statement. Why do I need to study that mathematics? I'm never going to use it.
All the time.
Yes.
Okay, so we didn't know the final sequel. So as a result, what happened? It caused us to blow as students, meaning what? We reject the knowledge, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
So the cycle of action of study is we begin to study the subject. We take whatever subject and we begin to learn. If we fail the growth, next stage of cycle of action, we fail to compass the knowledge, meaning we don't take the time to look at all the elements of what we are studying. Okay. As a result, what happens? We don't see the final sequel. So I don't understand all the elements of what I'm studying, and I don't understand why I'm never going to use statistics. How many of us, unless you're going to go into a field that deals specifically with statistics, and someone says, have you ever studied statistics? Why would I waste my time studying that? I'm never going to use it. Yes.
Yes, I said that.
Okay. So now here we have all these mathematical engrams, and then we have a savior that comes and gives us a problem book. In order to learn about your miserable condition, you got to learn about it in a mathematical way.
Right.
Go ahead, Sister Anya.
It's amazing that we have such a problem with mathematics, once we get to trig and calculus and those higher forms of mathematics in this world, when we are ourselves mathematics. I was in a class yesterday evening, and we talked about how well we're able to make calculations at the speed of 24 billion miles per second. And one of the examples we used was avoiding a car accident. If a car crosses into your lane, and I actually experienced this as a passenger. A brother was driving, and a car crossed over into the lane, and he was able to maneuver over onto the shoulder, avoid hitting the wall, get us back in lane, and all in it seemed like a split second that it happened. He was able to mathematically calculate what he needed to do, as if he didn't even have to think about it. But we know that, and that was one of the things that we were being taught in the class, is that when people say that you do things without thinking, it's not true. It's just the fact that we think so quickly at the speed of the average speed of 24 billion miles per second, that we make the calculations that quick, but yet we have a problem when it comes to sitting in a classroom and learning trig or calculus or something like that. I just thought that was just amazing.
Oh, that's a great example. Probably about a month ago, my wife and I were traveling from the store coming back home, and as I was traveling down Route 32, there was a car coming towards us that was going to make for them, it would have been a left-hand turn directly in front of me. And right behind that car was another car that was almost tailgating them. So I saw the one car make the left, And I calculated that I can still, he's going to make his left-hand turn. It's not going to affect me. But then at the last minute, I saw the other car immediately behind it. And I found it amazing that I was able to shift to the right, shift back to the left, get around the car, and at the same time, avoid another car that was coming on. My wife was pumping the brakes. You know, sometimes you pump brakes on the passenger side.
Yes, sir.
And I just thought it was amazing, you know, and I look at it like, yeah, see, that's how I roll, you know what I'm saying? That's how I do things, you know. But it was just amazing how, you know, going with what Sister Anya said, sometimes certain things happen and it's like muscle memory, instantaneous. It's just something else that's there. And I think at that moment in time, we are in connection for a brief second with our higher God self.
Mm-hmm.
That's just one way of looking at it. So, okay, let's finish this up. Cycle of action. So we begin the study of a subject. There's something in our study that we fail to understand. So this could be any of the three gradients, okay, that causes this. And then what happens is we don't see the final sequel. So what happens? We reject what we study. Many of us reject mathematics and science based on something from our childhood, based on experiences in the classroom, okay? Many of us have already discussed in these mathematical engrams where at one time you used to go to the board to do a mathematical problem. You knew the walk going up there that you didn't understand it, and you already knew either the teacher was going to make you feel stupid, or as soon as you turn around, the other children in the classroom are going to pick on you for the whole rest of the day because they're going to say you're stupid. And they're the same ones that if they went up there, the same thing would happen to them. But unfortunately, we were the ones that went up there and got it incorrect. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's something there that was, a needle was implanted in our brain with regards to mathematics and science, but that's by design. That's by design. Because if we are to break the circle of the gods, what do we have to come into a knowledge of? Mathematics and science, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we gotta confront that concept eventually. So now in the text, it says that what happens is the student will blame the teacher. Well, I got out of that classroom because the teacher said X, Y, and Z, or the teacher didn't, you know, she said something that irritated me, or I stopped going to the org because so-and-so did such and such. So now we blow from the study, but we blame it on someone else. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, in the tech, that's called a service facsimile. In Islam, that's called deceptive intelligence. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. 3 key points to study, and here's where we're going to try to land this real quick. One must understand the specific rules with regards to the concept under study. Whatever we study, if you take, for example, taking a math book or a science book, the first part of the chapter, that book is going to give you what's called the principles, the theorems, the axioms, or the rules. Does that make sense?
Can you say that again, brother Lukman?
Yes, ma'am. If you look at a math book,
Mm-hmm.
at the beginning of a chapter of a math book, like if you take a specific chapter, 9 times out of 10, the first thing that's going to be discussed in that chapter are the rules that you need to know to understand that level of mathematics. Okay, if you look at our supreme wisdom, doesn't it start with the rules of Islam?
Yeah.
Okay, so whenever we study a subject, that subject is composed of elements and rules. So if we understand the elements that make up the subject that we're studying, and we understand the rules, then we understand the relationship between the elements of that concept. Does that make sense? Okay. So we have to, anything we study, there's rules. If we study chess, you have to understand the rules, correct?
Correct.
If you study mathematics, you have to understand PEMDAS. PEMDAS is something you need to know from the level of arithmetic. And if you get up to calculus 4, you're still using PEMDAS all the way up to calculus 4. And the only difference between the different levels of mathematics are there's different rules at each level. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. There's the rules for fractions. There's some rules in fractions that are the same as arithmetic, but there's some rules in fractions that are only for fractions. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So when we understand that in studying a concept, there are specific rules we have to know. These are called the stable data. Okay. We have what's called actual facts, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So when we deal with circumference of the planet Earth and we're using these formulas, those formulas we use to calculate the circumference of the planet Earth, the formula is a stable datum that can be applied to calculating the circumference of all the other planets. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Never thought of it this way.
Because the circumference formula doesn't change for Jupiter. It's the same formula for Jupiter as it is for the Earth, as it is for Pluto, for Mercury. It's the same formula. Only thing that changes are the variables, the data. Okay. So then one must understand the doing this details, meaning what? You have to understand the sequence of actions. So in mathematics, we can say that's PEMDAS. Okay, which is also called an algorithm. There's a step-by-step process. In auditing, there's a step-by-step process in how we audit, correct?
Yes.
If you have your manual, there's a step-by-step process, and we're supposed to do it in this order. Okay, that's an algorithm. That's the doing this details or the sequence and actions of auditing. You don't jump right into the engram before you tune up to see if the pre-clear has perceptics, correct?
Right.
Okay. And then we have to understand why it's done. And that's the whole point of studying the tech of Dianetics, book 1, with understanding why the tech works. It doesn't make any sense just to try to go down the sequence of auditing someone unless you understand why it works.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that is the theory as a line of reasoning. Okay.
Brother Lukeman,
Yes, ma'am.
in that last slide, can we apply those 3 concepts to start, change, stop?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Good eye for that. Of course, start, change, stop. So what's a good way to start any study? Find the stable datum. What's the change? The change takes place through the sequences and the actions. Okay. So for example, if you look at mathematics, what's the 4 basic rules of arithmetic? Add, subtract, multiply, divide, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there any other operations in mathematics other than add, subtract, multiply, and divide? If you look anywhere from arithmetic to calculus, are there any other operations? The answer is no.
No.
In all the levels of math, all you will find is add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Therefore, if you understand how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide, you already have the potential to do any math level from arithmetic up to calculus. You already know how to do it. It's just removing the doubt. And I'll give you a key word. If I said the word trigonometry, right, that word by itself will stimulate someone. Why? Because we just don't understand what the word means. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. What does trigonometry mean? What is a trigon? What does the word tri mean? T-R-I. Tri means what?
3.
3. So a trigon is a shape that has how many sides?
3 sides.
And the word metri, the suffix, means to measure. So what's trigonometry?
3 sides to measure.
It means that's the literal translation, but trigonometry is geometry that is applied specifically to triangles. That's all it is.
Okay.
Okay. And in trigonometry, you have to know how to add, subtract, multiply, divide. Does everyone in the room know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide?
Yes, sir.
Then you already have the potential to do everything from arithmetic up to algebra to trig and to calculus. You already have that ability. Okay. And then that's the start to change. And then the stop is understanding why. And then if you understand, when do you apply trigonometry? You can use trigonometry to calculate distances. Okay, so you understand why that level of math is being used. So Sister Anya, you're right on point. That's a cycle of action. Start, change, stop. Anything else, Sister Anya?
No, sir, but
Okay, that's just another long-winded answer to a question. And this is the last point, and this is going to be very quick, but this is something that it just one of those ideas that popped in the head. So I look at that as, okay, this is an assignment Allah gave me to study, to extract and look a little bit deeper into the wisdom. You look at the root of civilization. The lesson says the root of civilization is in Arabia, at the holy city Mecca, which means where wisdom and knowledge of the original man first started when the planet was found. Now, we've seen this before, correct? I just wanted to look at this from a different angle by doing some word clearing. 3 key words here: the word root, the word civilization, and the word Arabia. The idea that came to mind by Allah's grace is, what does the word Arabia actually mean? So why is the root of civilization in Arabia? How does this have anything to do with the study of the word?
does
Well,
Arabia have anything to do with blackness?
Saudi Arabia, the word Saudi.
Oh,
means
Saudi, that's it. Yes, sir. Mhm.
Saudi Arabia. If we look at the fact that civilization means knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, refinement, and is not savage, I forgot to put that in there, in the pursuit of happiness. And if civilization also means righteousness, the knowledge of self, the science of everything in life, love, peace, and happiness, then the root of all of those things, we could say, is in Arabia, correct?
Yes.
Can we follow that logic?
Correct.
All these things are found in Arabia. But now the question is, what is another meaning of Arabia, and how can it apply to this? Okay, so now when we do the word clearing, what does the word Arabia actually mean? So we're looking at another, so when we do word clearing, you look at the word you're defining based on the specific meaning, and then you look at all the other understandings of that word. So the word Arabia means and this is basically from an Arabic dictionary, it means to express, to voice, or to state clearly. It means to make plain, or to give understanding, or express clearly. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So now what happens is when we clear the word, it gives us a different way of looking at this lesson. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So the root of all the elements that make up civilization is found in one's ability to give expression, state clearly, and give understanding. That's just another way of looking at that statement in the lesson, but we look at it as an equation. We look at the word Arabia and we look at the different meanings for Arabia, and it gives us another way of looking at that particular response, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So the root of civilization, knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, and refinement, the root of that is found in one's ability to express themselves clearly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that means the average person speaks 400 words considered well. That means the more words that we can use to express our thoughts, the more knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, refinement, knowledge of self, the science of everything in life, love, peace, and happiness, all that increases because the root of it is in our ability to speak past, present, and future tense being perfect. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Sister Anya.
It's reminding me of every week in study group how we're asked to express our thoughts, and that this is actually key to our development. I don't have the exact words that the minister gave when he, gave that command to us, but I know it has to do with us developing into our higher selves. And so that goes in line with what you've outlined here.
Okay, praise be to Allah. Still got this cough. This could be why there's more in our 13 rules of instruction. Says there's more to be understood in the word. So it's taking the lesson, but just look at the word Arabia from a different angle, and then it gives us another way of perceiving or seeing something in that lesson that is applicable in present time. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Okay. Quick summary. So what are the 3 barriers to study? Anyone? 3 barriers.
Misunderstood word, too steep a gradient, and
Lack of mass.
Lack of
lack of
math.
math.
Yes. So now what are the somatics connected to each barrier? If you think covert hostility, meaning anger being bent or squashed, then that was based on which barrier? The first one we
Lack of math.
lack of mass. Confusion or reeling was based on which barrier? Here's a
Too
way to
steep a
remember it.
gradient.
Yeah, too steep a gradient. Think of going up a ladder. If you're going up a ladder, does that make you kind of feel kind of woozy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if you're going up a roller coaster, too steep a gradient, how does that make you feel? You feel a little woozy?
Mhm.
Right.
And then overt hostility is anger, you're complaining, you're fault finding. Which barrier was that?
Misunderstood word.
Misunderstood word, yes. And we just talked about the emotional tones that are connected to each one. So how is the study text similar to auditing a PC? We're actually auditing the subject that we're studying because we've come across some blockages, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So whatever subject we're studying, we're actually almost like we're applying a self-audit on the subject we're studying. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And what ayat from the Holy Quran gives us insight into the study text? That was found in what surah and ayat? Do we remember? It was surah 10, ayat number 39. Surah 10, ayat 39. And what is another meaning for the word Arabia?
To express, state clearly.
To express or state clearly. So the root of civilization is in Arabia. We could see that as the root of civilization is based on one's ability to express themselves clearly. Look at the minister. Does he express himself clearly?
Absolutely.
Does he not, therefore, could he not represent what it seems like for the root of civilization to be in Arabia?
Mm.
Just another way of looking at
Yeah.
it, right?
Right.
Okay. When you look at the root of the teachings, don't we find the root of civilization in Arabia? Isn't that the root of the teachings coming through the minister?
Yes.
As far as amongst us here, he would represent our root, meaning he, as a root feeds the tree, the minister feeds us, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So the root of civilization in North America is in Arabia, the minister. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Just another
Yeah.
way of looking at the concepts. Does anyone have any questions, any thoughts, any cognitions, any wins, any case gain, any corrections before we close this out?
I just had a quick question. Compass, is it synonymous with understanding?
Yes, it is.
Oh.
Word compass. When you take the word compass, one of the meanings of the word compass as a noun is the instrument that's used to draw a circle, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so compass does, it also means so that you can't compass knowledge, meaning the inability to understand something.
Thank you.
So when you look at ayat, when you look at Surah 10, verse 39, knowledge is rejected because it can't be compassed, and its final sequel can't be understood. That in that one ayat gives us the reason why we stop studying. There's something in it we don't understand, and we don't understand why we're studying it. And when you add those two ingredients, not understanding why we're studying something, and then we can't understand it, the tech gives us the reasons why we don't understand it. It's either too steep a gradient, lack of mass, or misunderstood word. So here's where the tech is a tool that can be used to help us go even deeper into that one particular ayat. But there's more. There's more ayats in the Holy Quran, and we'll probably, God willing, share those at another time. But that tech allows us to open up that verse. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
The minister said that our wisdom is like a safe full of riches that we don't have the key to. The tech allows us to get access to the treasure that's in the safe. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So, anyone else before we wrap it up? Close it out. Make sure you put your email in the chat so that I can send these documents to you. As soon as this uploads, I will put this on the YouTube channel. That way you can go back and study it. Does anyone have any concepts or subjects that they would like to see covered in the future? I don't mind taking any type of an assignment. As far as mathematics, physics, science, chemistry, Dianetics, it doesn't matter.
Memory, like how to increase memory. Is there anything you can talk about that
Memory
next time?
increase. Yes, ma'am. I'll put that on my list of things to do. Anyone else? If not, we will go ahead and wrap this up. I thank you for your time and attention. I pray, Allah, that something was covered in here that will give us all case gain. I'm thinking that we all have some case gain. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, praise be to Allah. If any ideas or thoughts or corrections or anything comes up, please send me an email. I'd be more than happy to address whatever subject comes up. Thank you for your attention, your time, your cognitions, your wins, your thoughts. And let us go ahead and close it out in prayer. Attention, prayer. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, Lord of the worlds, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful. Master of the day of judgment in which we now live, the alone do we serve, thine aid do we seek. Please, Allah, guide us on the straight path, the path upon whom thou hast bestowed favors, not the path upon whom thy wrath is brought down, nor of those who go astray if they have heard thy teachings. Ameen.
Ameen.
Assalamu alaikum, family. Thank you.
Wa alaikum salam.
Walaikum
Walaikum salam. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.